Welcome to Gazali. What we are today is often determined by our past. In the world, we have had three most ancient civilizations. We had the Mesopotamian civilization, we had the Egyptian civilization, and we had the Indus Valley civilization. Indus Valley, all these three civilizations are almost contemporary. And what we are, in a way, has been determined by Indus Valley civilization to a large extent. The story of how Indus Valley civilization was discovered is very beautiful. Somewhere in the second half of the 19th century, there was a railway line being built between Lahore and Multana. And the British engineer who was in charge of this railway line discovered that one of the contractors was supplying bricks at half the cost to the British Railways. And so he was very inquisitive and inquired, and he realized that this contractor was just picking up bricks which were baked about 2,500 years ago and supplying them to the British Railways. And then bureaucracy at that time was as bad as it is today, and excavations only started in 1920s. And then the mystery of this great civilization was revealed to us. We have with us today a man who is directly connected with this civilization. Dr. Vasant Shinde is the Vice Chancellor of the Deccan College and is the Chief Archaeologist of the excavations which are happening in Rakhegari. The Harappan civilization, the first site was Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, then many other sites were discovered in Gujarat, and now this site, which is the latest site, is in Haryana near Hisar. It's called Rakhegari, and Dr. Vasant Shinde is the Chief Archaeologist who is doing work in this area. And he's going to talk about these excavations, and he's also going to tell us how, what we need to learn and what we can learn from the findings of the Harappan civilization from Rakhegari. Welcome, Dr. Shinde. First, you please tell us about when did you start these excavations?
I started working in that region, which is called the, ancient Saraswati, and today it is known as the Ghaggar region. So I started working in 2006, maybe almost 10 years ago. And initial research was mainly to, number of sites were discovered earlier, maybe 50 years ago. And we want to check because there are a lot of information which was missing. So we wanted to revisit the sites and select some sites for, maybe further investigation. So when we started, our survey in that region, we noticed that a lot of sites are missing now. So what happened, there are most of the sites are in the form of mounds, and after the partition, most of the mounds which belonged to the government earlier, or the panchayat, then they were handed over to the people coming from Pakistan. So after they came here, they started leveling those mounds, and they wanted to convert that into an agricultural field. So in that process, number of sites, were completely destroyed in this particular process.
So now this civilization is 2,000 to 2,500 years old, BC. 2,000 to 2,500 BC. So that means it's about 4,000 to 4,500 years ago. Now, today's lecture, which you delivered, was essentially what we can learn from that. So now, if I have to ask you about some of the most important things we can learn from the Harappan civilization, shall we start with what?
I think what we can start with the trade.
The trade, okay.
There's so much to learn from the trade. One thing is clear that Harappans were at the disadvantage because they had no access to the raw material which was required for manufacturing number of artifacts or the crafts. So initially they developed good contacts because they were controlled by the contemporary population which were around the Harappan region. So they developed good contacts with those people, and they started getting those supply of raw material from them, and they had the technology with them. So what they did, they imported raw material from them, they processed in their factories or in their workshops, and they supplied the finished goods to the same people from whom they were getting.
So which were the areas they traded with?
With Rajasthan mostly, because Rajasthan, the entire copper was coming from Khetri belt in Rajasthan, which was controlled by the local, what we call as the Ganesh or Jodhpura culture, which was contemporary to the Harappans. Then a lot of food grains came from Malwa region
Okay.
and the Mewar region of Rajasthan, and that was again controlled by the.
What was the connection between the Arab world and the Harappans?
No, that was later in fact. What
much
they did in fact, initially they developed the domestic
Domestic
trade
trade. Okay.
or the hinterland trade. Gold came from South India.
Gold from South
Yeah.
India. Okay.
And that is scientifically established. Now we have carried out analysis, chemical analysis on copper and gold, and we have pinpointed the source of this raw
Gold to
materials.
South India.
Yeah,
So there was a vibrant trade.
yeah, vibrant trade. So initially they did very flourishing trade with this contemporary population around them, and gradually then there was a greater demand for the articles made of semi-precious stone from Mesopotamia, from Egypt. So they started this the trade with
export.
them. Yeah, trade initially trade with them, and then they started manufacturing such objects as per the demand of those people.
Okay.
For example, the beads that they have made for the domestic market are very small.
Okay.
But then maybe there was a requirement from that side, from the west, that we want a bigger, long beads.
So even today we have export quality only. That export quality was existed for 4,000 years ago.
Exactly.
And when did the trade with Arab world start?
That is around 2600 BC. Proper flourishing
Flourished
trade
Harappan
started.
civilization.
And they started exporting luxury goods to those people. And what they did in fact, because of this, because the evidence that is available indicates that more things were going from the Harappan region to the west or the West Asia, and less things were coming from that
So
side.
it was export oriented trade.
It was export oriented. So what they did they through this trade they were able to get a lot of wealth from that side, and they started flourishing. They developed into urban phase because of that. So there is something to learn from that. Like for example, Japan has did that after Second World War. They were completely destroyed, and they follow the same pattern as the Harappans did 5,000 years ago.
Okay.
So that is one thing that the world has learned from them.
Yeah. So number one lesson would be flourishing trade. Trade makes a place develop.
Now why our government is giving a lot of emphasis on trade, on export of the trade. So that is very important to learn from this. Secondly, now we can learn a lot from the Harappans about the water harvesting and water management. There is a site called Dholavira in Gujarat, Kutch part of Gujarat, which is a desert. And in that part, there is a occasional rainfall, and small streams get maybe these flash floods. So what they did, they had to establish this particular city because it is on a very strategic, trade route from Sindh to Saurashtra. So they had to establish city, and that time also the climate was not much different from what is today.
It's almost like a semi-desert, arid.
Almost like arid. But then there were two small streams by the side of the city. So they dammed those these two streams, and whenever there is a flash floods, water coming through these streams, the entire water was diverted inside the settlement, and they dug underground water tanks, number of water tanks in all the parts of the city. And they were connected by underground
Underground tunnels.
Water channel system.
And some of the tunnels, when you showed, thing were about 7 feet tall.
Yeah, 7 feet tall, and then they have dug into solid rock. So that is a big question for us, how they have done that without the availability of iron implements or steel implements.
Yeah, it's very interesting because in Goa, we have 120 inches of rain. I think it's so much of rain, and in spite of that, we have water shortage in the month of May. And I always say that this requires an excellence in mismanagement of water, that we can have such kind of a water shortage in Goa. So I think we have a lot to learn from the Harappans.
Even today, if this particular system of the Harappans, water harvesting and water management is applied in the Kutch part, which is a desert part there, I tell that entire Kutch will be a green land. So that automatically we can take care of the problem. But this is something to learn, but we are not really learning from the history. So it has to be taken seriously.
Deviating from the topic a little bit, can you enlighten us about, the contemporary civilization during this time was the Egyptian civilization. Now, if you have to make a comparison between Egyptian civilization and the Harappan civilization, how would you compare it? What were the most important contrasting and complementary facts?
See, the administrative system was different. In Egypt, it is well documented, they have this kingdom system. ruled by king or queens. And there is evidence for that also. They have excavated palaces, they have excavated royal tombs, etc. there. And a lot of wealth was also buried in the royal tomb. In the Harappan levels, we do not get that type of evidence. If there was a palace at all, or if they had a, this kind of type of monarchical system, then it should have been somewhere in a Harappan city, like Mohenjo-daro, for example, which is quite big.
There is a citadel area, but that is not a palace.
That is not a palace. Maybe that was there is a maybe division of maybe the society. Maybe there are some
middle class
elite
people
class and the maybe common people like that. So we do not get that type of system. No evidence of palace. We do not have maybe royal tombs like what we get in West Asia. So my understanding is that they were able to build some lot of public architecture like fortification wall, for example. Dholavira, the city is divided into 3 parts, and each part has a very strong fortification wall. So what they must have done, they must have got the entire community involved in getting these things done. So today in villages, we have some kind of panchayat system. So maybe that type of system was there right from the Harappan times.
So if I won't be wrong, if I say that, okay, there is some kind of a panchayat democratic system and some kind of a socialist idea in the Harappan civilization, vis-a-vis in Egypt, there was the slavery. Only the slaves could be used to build pyramids and structures like that. There was no slavery.
So that is one difference. Second difference is, which is very important. And we need to really understand that. The Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, they have created huge monumental buildings like pyramids, for example, in Egypt, or those big temples like ziggurats in Mesopotamia. They have produced life-size images and a lot of art. The Harappans have not done that. So that does not mean that Harappans were not capable. They were very much capable. Technologically, they were sound as the Mesopotamians or Egyptians, or maybe more than that.
Okay.
But they realized that this type of creation is of no use to the common people. So the wealth that they were getting, instead of investing in creating this type of maybe features, they use that wealth for the welfare of the common people. So they created beautiful well-planned cities, and those well-planned cities had the sanitary system which was unparalleled in the contemporary world.
Before coming to the sanitary system, so I would say that the Harappa was more or less a welfare state.
Something like that.
So it was for the common people, and there was no too much of discrimination, and facilities like all this was created for everybody. Yeah. And now coming back to this sanitary system, you mentioned that the first sanitary toilet of the world was in Harappa.
Yes. The earliest evidence we have found in the Harappan level, which is dated to around 2600 BC, maybe around 4500 years ago. So far we were thinking that this particular concept has come, maybe the Britishers brought with them, or the Westerners brought with them. But we have the earliest evidence. And what is interesting that we have commode, we have the evidence of commode, and there is a pot inside the maybe that toilet area, and a small lota in that. And today also our toilet system is more or less same. So that suggests we have been carrying forward the tradition for last 5,000 years.
Yeah, but what is the reason? For example, Harappa had the first sanitary toilet. So India discovered the sanitary toilet, the commode. But then there are almost for 3,000 years there was a sanitary constipation. This country did not have any commodes, and then the British reintroduced it. So perhaps what might have happened just because of the degradation of the civilization?
No. What happened after the decline? In India, the second urbanization took a lot of time to develop. Maybe after a gap of 1,000 years. So most of the elements of the urban features, they were lost in a fact, because of this gap. But then when the time came again for the development of urbanization again, maybe around in 6th century BC, then we had the idea, because that idea was survived in the form of maybe oral tradition or somewhere like that. So it was not difficult for us to develop the urbanization quickly because of many factors. And then then again the same concepts come. The toilet concept again comes into existence. More or less the second urbanization is based on the Harappan town planning. Not much different. So we think that Harappans died maybe around 1500 BC. That is not the case. After the decline, slowly and gradually Harappans began to disperse, and they got into the surrounding area, got mixed up with the local people, and they kept alive maybe the Harappan tradition of the knowledge there. And that is how that knowledge has continued till modern times. We always connect ourselves to the Harappan culture or Harappan civilization.
Talk to us a little bit more about the sewage systems there, because they had almost a modern sewage system and perhaps very modern urban planning.
I think this planning was done probably before the establishment of the cities. Like today, even if you want to really establish a city, you prepare a proper plan, and it seems that Harappans have done that. So the arrangement of the street is such that that it appears that they have really given a lot of thought for this. The structures are located on both sides. In each structure there is a bathing facility, toilet facility, and then inside what we have noticed or what we have excavated, inside there was a network of the drainage pattern. Both in fact the open drainage system was there, maybe for the bathrooms in fact, and for the toilet there was a closed drainage system. And then each toilet bathroom was connected by this to the drainage line. And then all the drainage lines were ultimately connected to the main drainage. And the evidence from Harappa indicates that the main drainage was taken outside the city wall and emptied somewhere.
Okay.
So that means they have made sure that no dirty water is sprayed within the settlement. So that indicates that Harappan cities were very clean, spotless, and hygienic.
So Harappan led a very healthy life.
Very healthy life, and that is reflected in the skeletal remains also. We are getting very good evidence of the healthy Harappans in the cemeteries. What we have forgotten or what we have not really borrowed from the Harappans, that we have borrowed maybe more or less the same planning, but we don't care for the the disposal of the garbage or disposal of the sewage system properly.
So the Harappans must be turning in their graves after they see the way we dirty and the way we litter our streets.
Exactly. So that is also something to learn from them. If you adopt that, then Prime Minister does not have to make special announcement that Swachh Bharat. We should inculcate this type of habit.
What about the religion in Harappan civilization? What is the role of the religion? What kind of religion may or may not have existed?
See, we do not get the evidence of the organized or public religion as such. There is no evidence of temples, or there is no evidence of or the life-size images. What we have maybe small terracotta figurines or sometimes stone figurines. So probably they must have practiced that maybe as a personal religion inside their structures.
There is one viewpoint that little there's a tablet where there is a kind of a yogi sitting, which is perhaps a precursor to the idea of Shiva.
No, that is there, of course. No, maybe Shiva was worshipped, but not in the form of a as a public figure. So they must have maybe practiced that that religious beliefs in their homes.
And what is the evidence of wars?
So we have
violence?
we have the evidence of fortification walls, and for the function of fortification wall maybe varies from city to city, not only for defense purpose. Probably maybe at some places like Dholavira, for example, which is a maybe a trading center. So there may be some part of the maybe fortification may be meant for the defense purpose. Maybe there were some hunter gatherers who could have created some trouble. But then at Harappa we don't really see the reason why the city wall should be there. Then maybe that could be a part of the planning also. At Mohenjo-daro, the city wall was must to protect the city from the floods, because the
floods, not from the human
not from
danger,
the enemies, yes.
Natural danger.
And there is a history in fact that the site is right on the bank of Indus, which is a very mighty and ferocious river. And there is a history that this river gets flooded, and the Harappan city was destroyed by flood 3 times. So first 2 times when the flood occurred and destroyed part of the city, their economy was booming, so they could rebuild the city immediately. And the third that flood occurred when the decline had started, maybe around 2000 BC. And after that they were not really able to reconstruct that city, so they left the city.
This you can basically make out because of the layers. the city is in layers.
Cities in layers.
Flooded, silt happened.
Yeah, silt is
next
there,
it was
yes.
built, again it was built.
And also, we have done, archaeologists also have reconstructed the climatic sequence for last 5,000, 10,000 years. And around 2000 BC, the climate all over the world, not only local climate, but all over the world, goes dry. So there is evidence of that everywhere. In fact, we have evidence from China, from Western Europe, from West Asia, from India, and most of the civilizations have collapsed at the same time. The Harappan and then Mesopotamian, Egyptian, they have collapsed at the same time
because of some natural calamity.
So that was some kind of a global phenomena. The climate change was a global phenomena.
Is
And
there
that,
any evidence?
that may have affected, their maybe, their agriculture system, their overseas trade, because there is evidence that sea level has gone down. Most of the ports, which were active for the trade purpose, they must have fell into disuse.
Dholavira was on the bank of the river, for the sea, and now it is inside.
Yeah, so Dholavira became, useless, in fact, from the trade point of view. So these are the, some collective reasons, for the decline of the Harappan civilization.
You said there is no evidence of war as such. Basically,
no
judging from there are no injuries on the skeletons.
No.
So can I sort of conclude or make a theorem that because there was no organized religion, there were no wars?
Could be one of the reasons. Could be, yes, because that that leads to a lot of conflict, human conflict. See, when the skeletal remains were discovered at the site of Mohenjo-daro in the upper levels. Sir Mortimer Wheeler, who was the one of the excavators of the site of Harappa, and then of course he was also was the chief or the head of the Archaeological Survey of India, briefly after the partition. So he made a statement without investigating properly scientifically the skeletal remains. He thought these are the people who were killed, and according to him, Harappan was a Dravidian civilization. And he said that they were killed by the Aryans. So in his book, he writes that Aryans stands accused for the destruction of the Harappan civilization.
That is not correct.
So that was the earlier hypothesis.
Impression.
And but then later, there is one physical anthropologist, Kenneth Kennedy from America. So he's a physical anthropologist. He investigated those skeletal remains properly, and he noticed that there were no injury marks. And the reason that he has given reason of the death of these people, probably because of the suffocation. So that means these people must have died because of the flood, not because of the war.
Okay.
And at no Harappan sites, we get large scale offensive and defensive implements.
Okay.
So that is missing, in fact.
That is actually very interesting, because you said that there were only small knives. There were no swords.
Yeah,
there were no
swords.
weapons of mass destruction.
Not really.
So in a way, perhaps the non-violence concept which Gandhi and Buddha, which later on adopted,
I think
perhaps originates in Harappan civilization.
There is, in fact, we have the evidence of the the practice of yoga during the Harappan times.
Okay.
There are some figurines, in fact, which are shown, these terracotta figurines, which are shown in different postures, yogic postures. Even the seal, which you are talking about, that Shiva, the representation of that is in the form of yoga. So I believe, personally, I believe that the yogic system was introduced by the Harappans, and that was a part of the non-violence system, which was developed.
Which later on got adopted by Buddha's.
Yeah, exactly.
Mahavirs
That
and Gandhis.
then carried forward from one generation to another generation till modern times.
Yeah.
Gandhi is that non-violence policy. Why it worked? Because it is deeply rooted in Indian tradition.
In this civilization,
Yes,
the culture.
and emanating from the Indus civilization.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting one. Tell us about few things which have had a continuity. Like, for example, you talked about the hull, the plow.
Yeah. I think there is a continuity in almost every aspect, I tell you. When it comes to the house plan, the modern house plan, particularly in Punjab and Haryana, is exactly copy of the Harappan house plan. It is open in the middle, and there are rooms on all sides.
Okay.
And very scientific. That is very scientific, because you get a lot of light and ventilation in the middle, open air, and that ventilation and
I
light
didn't know this
passes.
because in Goa, the traditional houses have a Rajangan, which
Right.
is a garden in the middle.
But
So
there is a
that's-
scientific reason behind that, which we really don't try to understand. Secondly, most of the houses
So
are
architecture is one continuity.
one continuity.
Yeah. And then
Secondly, they are using pots even today. The pots which are being used people are still making earthen pots in that part, in Haryana, Punjab, Gujarat, Rajasthan. And the shapes of the pot, some people have, maybe switched from earthen to metal pots. But the shapes of the pot has remained the same. There is no change at all. See, earthen pot, modern earthen pot, and the ancient 5,000 years old earthen pot looks exactly same. You will not be able to identify.
Only one of the things which I noticed in your presentation, that the earthen pot design was before baking.
Before baking.
And so it remained.
It
and
remained,
we can
yes.
still see the design.
And
today
same pattern they are following even today. They are making pots on wheel. They are still following the Harappan method of making manufacturing. Then I was talking to you about the long beads, carnelian beads.
Okay.
That is a Harappan tradition. And even today there are a lot of craftsmen in the Khambat region who are making these beads and they are exporting to West Asia and other parts.
I think we are almost finishing our time, so I must not forget the most important question. And that question is, first of all, were Vedas written by the Harappans?
No, there is no conclusive evidence as that.
It could be.
Could be, because there are
contemporary, more or less.
Yeah, more contemporary, or maybe they are talking about this Harappan people maybe.
Because Saraswati river is mentioned.
Veda, the Rigvedic text talks about Saraswati, and if we accept that Ghaggar was Saraswati, then yes, maybe they are talking about
the same.
Then it talks about the ideal town plan, which is divided into 3 parts. The only evidence of that kind comes from the Harappan levels. So there is a possibility. But then we are not getting maybe proper evidence of horse, which is frequently mentioned in the text.
So the horses they were not there, is not clear.
And there is no evidence of the typical Vedic gods in the Harappan levels.
Okay, one last question. Now the DNA typing is going on.
Right.
And once you find out exactly what is this DNA, whether we have the same DNA as the Harappans,
right.
I think this will be a great revelation about who we are.
Who we are, right?
Who we are.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about the DNA typing which is going on now?
So DNA is very important, because if you want to understand, because so far we have no clue about who are the Harappan people, how they really look like. We have no clue. So we cannot really identify these people at this particular stage. And we realized after carrying out a lot of investigations, we realized that if you want to really shed light on this particular aspect, like how they were looking like or who are the people, then you should get a DNA. And fortunately now we have DNA from the site of Rakhigadi. We have excavated some burials and we have been able to detect DNA from them. And this once the DNA study is completed, then certainly we can show also how the people were looking like, their relation with the contemporary population, relation with the modern population. So this is going to
when are we going to discover who we are?
Maybe in another 6 months.
Another 6 months. Okay.
But certainly now we will be able to, this is going to be a major breakthrough. Suppose I'm sure that we will succeed, but once we succeed that, so that is the first major breakthrough as far as the Harappan studies are concerned.
Thank you very much. It is not very common that one gets to speak to a person like Dr. Vasant Shinde. He has been educated throughout in India. He studied in Deccan College and then became the Vice Chancellor of the same college. Then he did his postgraduate studies in Cambridge. Then he taught in Cambridge. He taught in Japan. He taught in Korea. He taught in America. And I think the kind of research which he is doing and excavations he is doing is virtually might rewrite the history of human civilization. Thank you,
Thank you
for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.